Today we've got a collection of real-life stories from people who've experienced nearly unbelievable moments with their pets. Stories that prove there's a lot more to our furry friends than meets the eye. Some pets, like the dog in the last story, even seem to know things before their owners do. I'd just gone to bed and my cat raced into my bedroom, meowing and racing around the room. I thought he wanted food, though I'd never seen him this frantic about food before. I followed him down to the kitchen to fill his bowl so he'd calm down and I could get some sleep. Except that he didn't stop at his food bowl. He raced down to my office, looking back occasionally to make sure I was following him. When I got down there, I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw that the circuit breaker panel was sparking and then suddenly ignited. Because I was there when it ignited, I was able to turn off my main breaker and put the fire out before it spread. He saved my life and my home. What an incredible cat. It's always a scary moment when your pet starts acting weird, but in this case it paid off to listen to them. For 20 years, I was a long-haul truck driver. For the last 7 years of that, my orphan cat Sooty was on the truck with me. Sooty, a large Russian blue mix, was only about a year old when he discovered how to get me to return to the cab and keep him company. I was in the office of a truck shop, making the payment for truck repairs, when I heard a horn blaring. A worker came rushing in and said, "Lady, there's a cat in your truck doing that on purpose." I went to the truck. Sooty stopped, sat in my seat, and looked at me like, it's about time he showed up. After that, I soon learned to cover my steering wheel with a large box to keep him from honking the horn. If there's one thing I can say about cats, it's that they're not shy about letting their needs be known. Letting them be known with a truck horn, though, is definitely next level. We had a routine for bedtime. Before bed, Moses would go out and do the business, but occasionally during the night, he would come in and sit on my side of the bed. Just his presence alone would wake me up, and I would take him out and then go back to sleep. He was only allowed one trip out during bedtime. One night, we did our normal routine. I didn't know that it would change my life. My 15-year-old son was in his bedroom playing video games, and then I let the dog out and we went to bed. Around 1 AM, he wanted to go out again, so we went. I crawled back into bed with 5 hours until the alarm went off. Around 3 AM, Moses was sitting by my bed, whimpering. I mumbled, "No way, boy, go back to bed, I'm sleeping." He didn't move. In fact, he started pawing at my arm. I was starting to get annoyed and said, "Go away!" But he didn't move and he kept pulling at my arm. He was insistent, whimpering, grabbing at me. As I started to come fully awake, I heard a strange sound as I was trying to focus and figure out what was going on. I can't really describe the sound, but it was kind of a low growl moaning, and it was coming from my son's room. I jumped out of bed, fully awake now, and with adrenaline that only a mom fearing the worst can have, I sprinted to my son's room to find him in a full-on grand mal seizure in his bedroom. Had Moses not awakened me at that particular moment, we may never have known this seizure occurred, because it was summer and my son was staying up late and sleeping until noon most days. So my good boy Moses blew my mind when he made sure to let me know that my son was having a seizure in the other room. It's mind-blowing the way dogs can tap into something and be aware of medical issues like this. Good boy, Moses. My boyfriend came home one afternoon with a story about a dog he had seen at someone's house. He was furious. The poor thing was chained outside and very skinny. He told me the owner had gotten him because he wanted to train him to scare people. But the guy said he was dumb as a bag of rocks. He was a pit bull. The next day, I was sitting on the couch when my boyfriend walked through the door with the dog. Now, I was furious. He didn't listen to me at all. I told him to find the dog another home. No more talk about it. The dog crouched by the door. My boyfriend left to get him some food and stuff in the meantime. The dog stayed by the door, holding his head down and looking up at me ever so often. He wouldn't lift his head. He would strain his eyes to look up at me, but would not lift his head up. The ice on my heart cracked a little. I found a comfy blanket and put it down on the floor for him. I tried to coax him over, but he just sat by the door and stared timidly at me. Nothing. I had to physically push the dog while he stayed mostly in a sitting position to the bed beside the couch. He reeked. Oh no, if this mutt was going to stay in my house, he was getting a bath. I was scared as heck. What if he didn't like water? What if he hurt me? I ran the bath and pushed the sitting dog down the hallway. Took a deep breath and pulled him into the tub. He loved it. That was the first time I saw any joy in that dog's eyes. He didn't magically break out of his depressive state, but he really enjoyed the bath. I realized it was probably the first time he had ever felt clean, ever had a bath, and had ever been touched lovingly by a human. My heart melted a little more. When he was clean and towel dried, he actually walked down the hall with me. I sat on the couch, patting his head and talking to him. Then my boyfriend came storming through the door with bags in his arms. He made a big racket and the dog jumped up and ran down the hall. I got up and followed him. I found him crouching in the corner of the hall and he had to pee. He had peed most of the way down the hall while running from my boyfriend. I think he thought his former owner had come to get him. That's when the ice around my heart shattered for good. He was our dog. From that moment on, he was showered with love and affection. I don't think he took a second of it for granted. What did he do that I couldn't believe? He changed my mind about wanting him. He corrected my judgment about his breed and showed me I cannot judge a book by its cover. Wow, is someone cutting onions in here? My eyes seem to be leaking for some reason. You know, sometimes you choose your pet and sometimes the pet chooses you. This story is about our Australian Shepherd Freddy. My daughter and her family were visiting for a week a few summers ago. Our grandsons were 4 and 7 at the time. We lived in a cottage in the woods on a private road, literally no traffic except us. One morning, I was in the kitchen fixing breakfast when my husband walked past and down the hall towards the front of the house with Max, our youngest grandson, following behind. I heard the front door open and shut and assumed they had both gone outside. A few minutes later, I heard Freddy barking and barking and barking. It struck me as a bit out of character for Freddy, but I didn't think much more of it. Then my husband came back through the kitchen, and I made a disturbing realization. Max had gone outside, alone, while my husband had gone into the bathroom. I ran towards the front door in a panic, knowing Max could have disappeared far into the woods by now. But I still heard Freddy barking. When I got outside, I saw that Max was standing in the road and Freddy was standing directly in front of him, barking. If Max turned, Freddy shifted in front of him again, still barking. It wasn't typical for him to behave like that, and that's when it hit me. I realized then that Freddy was hurting Max, making sure he couldn't go anywhere he could get hurt or lost. I was so proud of Freddy, and so grateful that he understood that Max shouldn't be wandering around outside alone. Anyone who's had a herding dog knows that they will attempt to herd you, no matter how many times you explain you're not a sheep. But it's good to know that sometimes that instinct can come in handy. It was raining. I put my dog outside while I went shopping. I came home, put some groceries on the kitchen counter, then went to the back door to let my dog in. She was there, covered in mud. Not just a little dirty, but literally drenched in mud. I slid the back door open and told her she can't come in until she was cleaned off. I put away the shopping, changed into some old clothes, and was ready to go outside and give her a bath. Then I looked up. I was shocked. There she was in front of the door, clean. I dried her off and let her in. I told her she was so good that she could come sleep on the bed tonight. The next morning, I went into the yard and made a hilarious discovery. The kiddie pool was full of mud. She understood when I said she needed to be cleaned to come in and must have bathed herself. Actual LOL, what a smart dog. She's onto something here, if only she could teach other dogs the same trick. My ex-wife had horses. She was one of the best in the country at rescuing and rehabbing blind horses. We had several on the farm. A new one showed up that we paid $500 for. A Belgian, which is usually a giant horse. But when he was delivered to us, we were shocked. This one had a large head and looked like a skeleton with skin stretched over it. Bull came to us from a horse auction on an Amish farm. If we did not buy him, he was literally going to the glue factory. We had a heartbreaking decision to make. My ex was not having it and asked me for the money. I, as always, could not say no. We got the horse to the farm and had the vet come out, and she gave him 1 to 2 weeks tops. Well, he made it. He was a fighter. We named him Wolvie. We'd loved the movie The 13th Warrior and named him after the lead Viking. We called him Bull for short. Bull got much better and put on a lot of weight. Despite being blind, he still became the alpha of the herd. The sighted horses even bowed to this mighty horse. But he was a gentle giant. My ex would ride him bareback up to the mountain behind our property. But that's not the end of the story. Bull started to have problems and would not sweat. We had the vet out again. She had a bizarre recommendation. She told us to give him beer. This was an old racetrack method. You have not lived until you see a 2,000-pound horse slosh and swaying back and forth like an intoxicated human while walking. I know there are many jokes to be made. I know I made them as I laughed my butt off many times. He endured, but he was back each night with his herd, his family. But then he became sick again. This time he needed to go to the state vet school. We got him there. The cost was over $2,000. As the vets went to put a scope down his throat, he ate it. Yes, ate it. They did not charge us for it, thankfully, as it cost over $20,000. I do not remember the exact diagnosis, but it was not good and they gave him only months to live. His previous life had taken its toll on his organs. We did what we could do for the guy. He did well for a while, then started to show signs. The day finally came to call the vet and say goodbye. We pulled him out of the pasture and I dug a huge hole with the backhoe as I thought he should always stay with us. We brought him back in and laid him down. But first, something extraordinary happened. He called out to his herd several times to say goodbye and they responded. The whole herd was on the other side of the fence. Everyone, blind and sighted, miniatures and the donkey. The vet did her job and we stayed with him until the end and for a while after. We covered him as it started to rain. I would bury him when it stopped, but it did not. The rain kept on and was a monsoon by feeding time for the horses. Here's where the amazing part begins. The horses never left the fence, not even to eat. If you know horses, they never pass up a meal. Never. They did this night. I checked on them throughout the night and they all stayed on the fence. In the morning, I moved Bull into the hole with my ex holding the tarp so the horses could not see. We said our prayers and I filled in the hole. My ex opened the gate. What happened next is astonishing. The horses all walked around Bull's hole one by one and then walked out of the pasture. It was like watching a human funeral procession. I stood in awe and shock along with my ex-wife. The horses went and ate and Cowboy took over the herd. He was second to Bull. I miss Bull even now. I know he is in a better place, running through heaven free of pain and enjoying his just rewards for being such a good-natured survivor. I thought I might get through that one with dry eyes, but I was wrong. It's gotta be hard and expensive to look after sick and blind horses. I hope OP knows what an important job they're doing. One day, while I was working upstairs in my office, my German Shepherd came upstairs and stood in my office doorway barking at me. Then he walked over to the top of the staircase, barking as he looked down the stairs. He lifted his head, looked towards me, and continued barking. He walked back and stood in the office doorway again, looking at me, barking. He did this repeatedly for a few minutes while I worked. It became obvious he wanted me to follow him downstairs. I got up and asked him, "What's the matter?" As soon as I asked this, our house began to shake. Everything on my walls and shelves were rattling. I did not understand exactly what was happening, but we both ran down the stairs while I yelled, "Let's get out of here!" We got outside and I felt the ground moving. Then it stopped. We had just experienced an earthquake. They are practically non-existent in our region. Somehow, my boy knew it was coming and came upstairs to warn me. How spooky. I always read about animals knowing when a major weather event is happening, but this is next level. My dog Dakota snuck out while I was bringing groceries into the house. I saw her at the creek a few houses down, so I finished bringing the groceries in and then grabbed her leash. I saw that she was on her way home and that she had something in her mouth. She walked by me and into the house, then onto her bed. Now, I was thinking she'd caught a rabbit and hoped she was not eating it. I walked in and realized it was getting a bath from her. Dakota and her kitten were together for several years, right up into the day Dakota passed. You know, I keep seeing videos and TikToks of people finding kittens or having strays show up on their doorstep. If anyone knows the guy in charge of the cat distribution system, let me know. I'm ready and waiting for mine to show up. Years ago, I lived in a high-rise condo in Chicago. We lived on the 41st floor, and there were 10 condo units per floor. At the time, I had 2 Maltese dogs, Johnny and Edgar. Although they weighed under 15 pounds, I had no idea how big Edgar's heart really was. One very cold midwinter evening, I answered a knock on my door. I was shocked by what I found. My elderly Hungarian neighbor lady was standing there, holding a pot in her outstretched arms. She was crying and through her tears and heavy accent, she said, "Here, I thought you could use this. I don't know what to do with this. I don't need it anymore." Then she passed a pot of boiled chicken and rice to me. That's when she told me her heartbreaking story. Her little Yorkie had passed over the weekend, and she always prepared chicken and rice for him nightly. As she turned to walk back to her condo, my little Edgar bolted out of my door and ran ahead of her down the hall. He sat in front of her door and just looked at the doorknob, completely ignoring my calls for his return. She opened her door and he ran inside, jumped on the couch, and had made himself comfortable by the time I got there to take him back. "Can he stay for a little while?" she asked. I was unsure what I should do. I did not know her other than in passing on the elevator or in the hall. But I looked at her and then I looked at Edgar, already nestled in on the couch. He was not worried, so I finally said yes, but only under the condition that she would allow him to come home as soon as he was ready. She had to leave her door open and I would leave mine open for him to do so. A short time later, I heard her door close, and then when I looked up, Edgar was in my kitchen announcing his return. But the story doesn't end there. The following night at 7 p.m, Edgar carried on for me to open the kitchen door. I did, and he ran down the hall to her door. He scratched on it until she answered, and when she did, he pranced inside and jumped on her couch. Again, she asked if he could stay, and again I agreed. Throughout the following weeks into the spring, Edgar asked to go. The neighbor opened her door to his scratches, and Edgar pranced inside, reporting for duty to sit on her couch with her while she worked on her needlepoint and listened to music. An hour or so later, he would return. In the spring, she knocked on my door one more time. This time in her extended arms was a plant. "Here," she said. "This plant is my gift to Edgar. I am leaving for the airport now. I am moving back to Hungary. I have family there, but I will surely miss my little friend." I think Edgar might just be the best boy of all time. I know it's so cliche to say animals are too good and we don't deserve them, but man, when a dog does something like this, I can't help but think how lucky we are to have them. I have a little cat. My neighbor has a colony of feral cats living on her property, and she called me one day and said, "Hey, you've got to come over and see this kitten." So I went over and we were talking on her front veranda, and she said, "Here he comes." This tiny ball of gray fur bounced around the corner of the house and ran straight up to us. He promptly climbed up my jeans and curled up in my hands. It was so hard putting him down and going home, but I knew I'd be back for him the next day. I needed to get some stuff together for him first. A bed, a litter tray, food and water bowls, and kitten food. This little kitten literally fell asleep in my lap. He had one toy that was his absolute favorite. It was a little plush stuffed red ball with a jingly bell on it that came in a cat's Christmas stocking. He would carry it all over the house. You would hear the little bell coming and he'd trot into the room with it in his mouth. Then I discovered something that I thought was a fluke the first time. But after a few times, I realized it wasn't a fluke after all. This cat would fetch. I've had cats that would chase fluffy things on strings and pounce on balls rolling across the floor, but not actively fetch. He dropped the little red ball at my feet. I picked it up and threw it across the room for him to chase. And then he brought it back and dropped it at my feet again. I was gobsmacked. I threw it across the room again, and he joyfully chased it, picked it up, trotted back to me, and dropped it again. I love this story. That's basically a dog in the body of a cat, aka my dream pet. Although I'd settle for a dog and a cat, or 5. Our family dog Jessie has always been protective of our daughter, but one incident will stick with me forever. Jessie had always liked my daughter's boyfriend, so we were shocked when she almost attacked him as he was getting ready to leave. I immediately went to tell my daughter, and her response sent a chill down my spine. I said that Jessie had just tried to bite Blake, and she said, "Good. He just dumped me." I couldn't believe that the dog seemed to know that he wasn't part of the family anymore before I even did. There's really no better judge of character than a dog. I know it's bad, but I love that Jessie expressed herself with a little nip. That's loyalty in action. That's our final story for today, but we've got a lot more videos with wild real-life stories on our channel. There are stories about instant karma, awkward dates, and brutal clapbacks, just to name a few, so hit subscribe and check them out.